If you clicked on this link, make sure that you stay tuned after the introduction, because I'm going to tell you a couple of the questions that I ask during an interview for a travel assignment. Now, you know, they ask you some questions, but we can also ask them some questions, boo, because you're not going to be the only one quizzing me, and I need to know what I'm about to walk into. So hit the intro, boo, and let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am Shanice.Lashun, and I gotta say it before we get started, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you give it a thumbs up to let me know. That way I can post more content like this for you guys. Okay, so let's just get started. So as a traveler, there are a few things that you have to do prior to starting a contract, and one of them is doing an interview. So once you kind of look around, shop for the assignments that may seem like something that you're interested in, you typically get, you know, the pay package, the hospital name, and all that stuff. So the first thing that I'm going to educate you guys on, or just tell you guys that you should do, is do your research. Now, when you are presented with the pay package and the hospital and all that stuff, please do your research, because this is going to save you a tremendous amount of time for you, the recruiter, and for the interview or the hospital or whatever. So when I say do your research, that means going on forums for travel nurses, going on Facebook group pages for travel nurses, and just even using Google results or Google reviews to kind of see exactly how the community feels about the hospital, how other travelers feel about the hospital, and shoot, even some of their full-time employees feel about the hospital. So it just kind of gives you a general basis of, okay, is this a hospital that I may want to work at? Let's say you do submit for the application, then do your research, and then come to find out that this is not a hospital that you want to work in or jeopardize your license or anything like that. The interviewer calls you for an interview, and now you tell them, well, I'm not interested. So now it's kind of like you're wasting time when you could have been looking at another travel assignment. Do your research before you even submit. Make sure that pay packages add up based off of the amount of money they're giving you versus, you know, for your stipend and stuff, versus what the cost of living out there is. You know, is it gonna balance out, and is it gonna be worthwhile? So research. That is the biggest thing before you ever take a interview for a travel assignment. Typically interviews are over the phone. They call you over the phone, they ask you a bunch of questions, they try to get a good feel for you, they ask you some questions, tell you about the unit. Sometimes they may or may tell you some things in the questions, so based off of what they tell you, you can ask or maybe not ask. When they open up the floor for you, that is your opportunity to try to dig in and see exactly how much you can get out of the manager or the director or whoever's doing the interview. So this is where I try to get a good foundation or basis of what I'm actually walking into, because 9 times out of 10, there's a reason why they're needing the travelers. So if you can kind of piece pieces together, like piece pieces together, then you can kind of figure out, okay, now I see what's going on. So one thing that I always try to make sure that I always ask, at least at the beginning, is this a 13-week contract, or is this however long of a contract you were told it was going to be? You just want to make sure that what the recruiter has told you matches with what the interviewer has told you. That way there's no confusion when you get your contract back. So adding to that, another thing that I like to make sure that I do is I want to make sure that I know what type of shift I'm going to be working. So am I going to be working 312s? Am I going to be working 410s? Like, what am I going to be working 8s, 5 days a week? Like, what are we really going to be doing? So because sometimes recruiters get one thing and then it's really opposite of what they get. So you want to verify these types of things, so when you get your contract, like I said, there's no confusion. Those are the two biggest things that you always want to make sure will match up with what your contract says, based off of the information that your interviewer provides you with from the facility. Okay, so once you get all of that out the way and you know that this is the type of shift that you're going to be working, you want to ask questions that kind of provide you with a broad understanding of how their department or unit flows. So I typically ask, please provide me with a typical day, or of how a typical day for a nurse would flow. Typically, how many cases do you do a day if you work in a procedural department? How many patients do you typically have on average in your unit if you are a bedside nurse? And then speaking on that, another important thing, if you do work bedside, you want to make sure that you understand if that unit were at full capacity, meaning that every bed was occupied, what is your nurse to patient ratio? So if you have a 20 unit bed, am I gonna have 5 or 6 nurses? Am I gonna have 4 nurses where we all have to take 5? Like how are we functioning? Does the charge nurse take patients, or is she just there to help out and be an extra pair of hands? So you want to know these things, because when you get there, that way you already have an understanding of how this unit flows, and you know that, okay, the charge nurse won't have patients, and if we're at full capacity, I'm gonna have 5 patients at the most, and that will be my patient load. So you want to know how this unit flows. You want to know how many nurses they have that are full-time, how many travelers that they have, so that way it kind of pieces things together for you to know. So this is something else. It really doesn't have to do with the flow of the department, but it just kind of helps you going into it. I also like to ask what type of charting system they use, because it could be Epic, it could be Allscripts, it could be Meditech, it could be Cerner. So you don't know, because there's a thousand things out there. So even if you don't have experience with it, or you're not sure, it still puts you at an ease of, okay, well, I know how to do Epic. Epic is pretty easy, or I've never really worked with Epic before, but you know, we'll get it, blase blase. So you know, you just want to get a general understanding of exactly what it is that this hospital is doing, and how the flow is, and how everything rotates. Now when I say speaking of rotating, because that reminds me, floating is also another big thing that you want to ask about. So a lot of times as a traveler, you may have to float, and you may have to float to a higher acuity or a lower acuity floor. It just depends. And sometimes as the traveler, it's going to be you 9 times out of 10 that has to go to a different unit. Now, that is important to ask, because if you can ask and they can tell you whether or not they have a floating policy for travelers, so you can actually write that into your contract, and you can be paid for it, or you can put it in your contract that you refuse to float. Now, if you're gonna write, I refuse to float, you need to run that by the interviewer first and let them know that you don't feel comfortable floating to another unit before you go putting it in your contract with your recruiter. So there are things that you do have to discuss with the interviewer before you go put it into your contract. So for example, another big thing that you need to make sure you discuss with your recruiter, the interviewer, and make sure that it is written into your contract are your days off. So I know if you specifically have a week that you want to take off, or a couple of days, or a weekend that you want to take off, and you know you have to take it off during this travel assignment, I would make sure that I tell the interviewer, make sure that they're able to accommodate those dates, and make sure that you run it by them. And then once you get the thumbs up from them, let your recruiter know that you guys did discuss it, and that way you can make sure that it is written in your contract, and that way it cannot be dismissed. If you go to say, I need these days off, do not forget that I need these days off, because it is written in your contract, so it has to be granted to you. So let's say you requested to have 4th of July off. Okay, well, you didn't have that written in your contract, but you go to request it off. She can't accommodate it because she already has let off a couple of her permanent staff off, so you have to be here. You really can't do anything about it because it was not written in your contract. But if it is not written in your contract, technically she does not have to give it to you, and technically that is an additional days off, and you kind of have to just be upset about it and work around it. I've had that happen, not personally to me, but I know I have friends that are doing travel nursing also, and that has happened to them. So please, 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 if you don't do anything else and you don't hear nothing else in this video, make sure that when you request for your days off, you make sure that those days off are written in your contract, and then make sure that the days off are written correctly. That way, now I've had that happen before. My second contract, my days were written wrong for the wrong month, and it was a whole big old misunderstanding. But make sure that they are written in your contract, and make sure that they are written correctly in your contract before you sign them. So from there, those are like some of the few bigger things. Now there are some other small things that you can ask, like scrub color, like what type of scrubs do they wear. So I found that is helpful to me, because on my very first travel assignment, I got there, I didn't ask what scrub color when I had the interview. I didn't have any idea that I was supposed to. I just assumed, like my old hospital, that they would give me scrubs, but that was not the case. I had to wear my own scrub. After orientation on the first day, I literally rode around the city trying to find the scrub colors that I needed for this hospital. It took me like 3 stores because the first store didn't have my size, the second store didn't have the color, so the third store was a charm, thank the Lord. But it took me 3 stores to figure this out, and I had to work the next day, so I had to go home, prep, and get ready for the whole next day. With speaking about your shipping stuff, another big thing that you also want to make sure, because this will come back to you as far as looking for housing and stuff, you want to make sure that if you're gonna have to take call, how long is your call back for your call? Like, for one, are you gonna have to be on call some nights where you just have to kind of stick around and just make sure in case they don't need anybody to come in, because that's gonna make a difference also, because then you'll have to factor that into your contract if you are gonna have to be on call. And then also, how long do you have from the time that you hang up the phone till you clock in? That could be anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour. I've had both. It just depends. You know, had I known a lot of this stuff from my travel assignment, it probably would have made my transition into traveling a lot easier. And you know, it's okay. We live, we learn. So that's why I'm sharing this with you guys. And that's pretty much it for this video. I didn't want to keep you too long. Just wanted to share a few things with you, and just a lot of the top things that I want to make sure that I ask in an interview, because it just helps me understand the facility better and just helps me make a final decision on whether or not I want to take the travel assignment or not. Because based off of that information, if you tell me something crazy out of all of that, I think I'm gonna think about it. Let me think about it, because typically you have about 48 hours. And if you're not sure, take your time. Don't let anybody rush you into signing anything, because it's going to be you at the end of the day having to deal with this contract, and you at the end of the day having to put up with all the BS and the bullshit and whatever. So you want to make sure that you taking a travel assignment that you are comfortable with. Do not let anybody force you into signing anything. You take your time. You have 48 hours to do your research. You have 48 hours to sign the contract. So you take your time and you do that. And I hope this video helps. Like I said, if you like this video, make sure that you give it a thumbs up at the end, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And I will see you guys later. I gotta go get ready for work because I got some lives to save tomorrow. So peace out, Lifesavers. I will see you later.